Greetings all, welcome to Everything Borrowed, where we sit down to share stories and have conversations with entrepreneurs to artists and everyone in between. Today's episode is powered by Blake's Hard Cider, 100% fresh pressed, all natural and gluten-free, straight from our family's 75-year-old farm in Southeast Michigan. Find us in your local grocer or have Blake's direct shipped to your home by visiting blakestore.com. Use promo code EverythingBorrowed to receive 10% off your first order. Must be 21 years of age. Please enjoy mindfully. Cider fans, rejoice! Our guest today is a dear friend of mine and one of the biggest advocates and pioneers in hard cider. Paul Vander Heide of Vander Mill Hard Cider over in West Michigan sits down with me today to discuss starting a family business, the bumps and bruises along the way, where the cider industry has been, where it is at today, and where it's going. Paul and I geek out on cider in this episode. I hope it gives you some insight into the industry he and I both cherish so much. Well, cheers, man. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah. All right. You bet. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. It's been, with all the Corona stuff, it's been far too long. And I feel like we haven't had any real industry gatherings, in the last, 18 months. So I feel kind of removed, and I know you stay a little closer to the beat of the cider industry than I out here, because you've been such a proponent, not only in Michigan, but nationally. And, I think we'll get back to, pretty soon here doing more industry specific things, but I felt like we were gathering so much steam as a group and as an industry, and then all of a sudden Corona, and now we're picking up the pieces a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I've been thinking about it more recently because, between Corona and sometimes just getting busy with business and life. Yep. But Corona in particular, I felt like for quite a long time throughout it, I've kind of found myself buried in a hole. Yeah. Mentally, where you don't have the obligation to reach out to anybody. You don't have the obligation to show up anywhere. You don't have the obligation to, be a part and be out with people. And and there's a certain comfort in that. I mean, I think most people that I talk to about it recognize that process of whether they're quarantining or whatever's happening, there's a certain solace that comes with just not having any obligation. Yeah,
I feel like everyone's kind of self-isolated a little more than they used to. Maybe they felt more obligated to be at certain things, do certain things, and I felt like in the cider industry we're just kind of gathering this kind of group and this cadence of meeting and all of that, and now we gotta kind of pick back up the pieces.
It's not easy either. I mean, I feel like I'm having to tell myself, like, hey, we can't just we can't hang around forever. We got to get back out and go because things are gonna keep happening, and we got to be a part of it and get back to some of what we used to be doing. Yeah, I mean, even like before we got on the show, we were talking about apple varieties, and just there used to be so much conversation about the right plantings, the right varietals. Doing the stuff that I think you guys do, at least in Michigan and, probably the Midwest better than anyone is, varietals and really kind of trying to tease that out. And, we used to talk about that as an industry, and now I feel like we kind of got to get back to, thinking about the industry a little bit more. How do you feel, the industry is handled the last 12 months, cider specific? Because, I mean, alcohol industry in general, it's kind of a tale of two stories, I feel a little bit. I feel like the alcohol industry, is growing, and there's a lot of growth happening there across the board and for various brands across the board. But cider is a segment that I think we still needed to be on the street talking about, getting in front of people. I feel like we did get paused a little bit in our mission. Yeah, I mean, growth across the beverage industry usually comes at the cost of somebody else. Yep. If you look at kind of total alcohol consumption across the United States over a decade or more, it's relatively flat. People kind of move within and out of different categories, and more so in the last handful of years than ever before. Whereas before I might be a self-proclaimed beer drinker, which means I wouldn't touch wine, or I wouldn't, or if I'm a wine drinker, I don't touch beer. And younger folks obviously have embraced everything, and it's more occasional. If I'm having a beautiful steak, I might have a beautiful cider. If I'm out at the beach, I might want to take on a more approachable cider, something I can drink longer, or I'm not taking that time to necessarily geek out over it. So I think for cider, we've always been such a small part of the total beverage industry.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain amount where our job hasn't changed.
Right.
We're still kind of yelling from the corner a little bit.
See if anyone will pay attention.
See if anyone will pay attention. And I think going back to, the roots, pun intended, of single varietals and ciders that are celebration type ciders gives our category depth, and it gives the same reason that beer and wine and everyone else that has kind of passion for making a product is paying pretty close attention and care to it, and you want people to appreciate that. But that's hard for us because we're oftentimes selling to beer drinkers.
Right.
We're on the same shelf generally as someone who might grab a white can of fizzy alcohol or a light beer or a craft beer.
Right.
So how do we express that cider is got so much behind it other than just its enjoyment,
right.
in the sunshine or
right.
otherwise?
I've always kind of struggled with it because it's like, do you work on the brand or do you work on the whatever brand it is within cider, and you really try to build that up, or do you stay the purist and dive into those roots and hopefully people will start appreciating it for what it is, and you got to kind of walk both lines. For me, it was always, how do you walk both of those? Because, I don't know how you can pay the bills with the stuff that really I think is unique about cider, per se. And so I've always struggled with that a little bit. And I think that has been one of our biggest dilemmas in the industry is, where does our drinker come from? I always said it's like this, this cousin in between, beer and wine, and it's drank both ways depending on how the brand or the company makes it, produces it, markets it. And I think we still are working through an identity crisis a bit, and
I think it depends on, people need to think about what they want their business to be.
Right.
What is your business model? Because, I, in a way, kind of fell backwards into this. We started out with a small retail cidery.
I remember going there for like the first year it was open, and you were like the only guy doing it. You and Mike were the only guys I knew of.
Yeah, I mean, so we started fermenting in 2008, and there weren't a lot of people doing it. And at that point, our focus was retail. We just wanted more people to come in and buy more donuts, buy sweet cider. Hey, try some of this fermented cider. It's
right.
pretty cool. And I look at our business now, and it was nothing I ever intended on being a part of.
Right.
I didn't expect that we would be selling kegs of cider, out of the state, or putting it in a can, or
right.
that it would frankly be, the lion's share of where our business comes from.
Right.
So a lot of it is like, you wake up and it's like, holy crap, here I am now. I got to figure out a way to make it work. Not quite sure how or why I got here.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, this is what we have to do. And so it for me, it is a multi kind of faceted approach where you've got, we've got our ciders that we put in a can and put in a keg, and that's where our volume is. And that is a different game to play than, taking people out to the orchard and talking about, the nuances of one particular cider variety over another and how that plays out in the beverage.
You said you started in 2008. So
yeah, technically we opened in 2006. We were just doing sweet cider and donuts. We modeled our business off of my in-laws who own Parmenter Cider Mill in Northville.
Yeah, I knew there was a relationship there. I didn't know exactly how, and I was going to ask you because I feel like being an orchardist, a cider mill operator is like a super, there's like a 0.1 of 1% of us that are in this line of work. And it's kind of rare, so I was wondering how you kind of fell into it, and because I knew you went to Hope College, and were going down the lines of business in general, and kind of what gave you the itch to kind of jump into this lavish lifestyle.
Well, that's right. Yeah, it's glamorous, isn't it? And a lot of it comes out of, like in your case, where you're in it's already been a multi-generational business.
Right.
It was just a new part of that business.
Right.
I had nothing to do with the apple industry prior to starting Vander Mill. Mm-hmm. my wife and I, after we got married, I was working with my dad's company, which was he was a third generation leader of a cookie company. My great grandfather
really
immigrated to the United States and started making sugar wafers. So if you know the pink and the white and the brown,
yeah, I love them. Yeah,
they're great. It's all sugar. It's all sugar with a little bit of crust on it, you know. And so I've always, I grew up in food manufacturing and always, expected to go work for my family's business and be that fourth generation. By the time I got there, it had diversified considerably but in addition to sugar wafers, doing contract manufacturing for some very big national companies, doing granola bars and cereal and these other kind of cookie and snack products. And unfortunately,
wow, I never knew that.
And it was cool. I mean, it was definitely growing up in a small business family. I don't know how to describe it necessarily, but it gives you a different perspective on things.
Yeah.
And career and life. And unfortunately, we had saw some opportunity and leveraged the business for it, and had all sorts of circumstances that were out of our control go in the wrong direction all at the same time. And my dad had to sell the company. So at that point I was like, well, what am I going to do now? Everything I thought I was going to school for and everything I thought I was going to be a part of is now gone.
Right.
And meanwhile, having met my wife and seeing, going to Parmenters and seeing how fun of a retail experience that is. People are just like here. People are here having fun. They want to be here. It's not like they've got to go figure out what's wrong with their, cable bill. I mean, they're here to have a good time and to let loose. And I liked how, they would employ a lot of local kids to work a counter, a lot of first jobs.
Everyone's first job. I love that about our deal. It's like, you get all these young kids that actually want to work, and it's cool to see them like take it on and learn it and figure it out. And
teach them how to sweep.
Yeah, right.
I mean, quite literally, if you've never taught someone how to sweep before, you're not living. But anyway, that always looked like a fun business. And in Grand Rapids, we have a great cider mill, Robinette's, just north of town, and I grew up going there. And I thought to myself, out on the lake shore, if you're not familiar with Michigan, just about 30 miles west of Grand Rapids is Grand Haven area and some of these other small towns.
Most beautiful part of the state, basically.
It's
east and west side of Michigan are like completely different animals. It's crazy.
Yeah, you don't want to go to the West Shore. It's disgusting over there. Terrible beaches. Just leave it. Don't come. It's not worth it. So I was looking at it saying, hey, this looks like a fun business. And, there are so many more cider mills over on the east side of Michigan. I thought, why is that? Why doesn't everyone want to go eat donuts and drink fresh cider and watch it be made and be outside?
Right.
So we were, I think I was, 26, 27 years old when we started writing the business plan and looking for property, and somehow convinced a bank to, lend us some money to start this retail cider mill out in the lakeshore.
So it wasn't alcohol, focused originally. It was just cider, donuts, old-fashioned cider milling.
I've gone back to my original business plan, and I can't even find the words hard cider or fermented in it.
Yeah.
And if you've ever been to a cider mill in the Midwest, you'll know, especially in the fall, that there's people everywhere. You can't keep them away. It doesn't matter almost how much you charge for a donut. They want it so bad, and rightfully so, because they're the best.
Greatest profit margin item in most businesses.
Yeah, you just got to sell a lot of them.
Right, exactly.
But anyway, so I thought this seems like a no-brainer. There's enough of a population out there to make this thing go. 100 years of history, which is what my in-laws had, and I'm sure pretty close to what you guys
Yeah, we're on our
had.
75th year.
75th year. That has a lot of value, right? That's a lot of memories that people are coming back to. And
one of the things I like about, and before I go there, for people who hear animals in the background, we're quite literally right next to the animal farm doing this interview. So I guess just to give some context to what's going on
part
here.
of the glamour.
Yeah, right. One of the things I often said about, this industry, and one of the things that makes it unique is, a lot of the experience, it kind of takes generations to kind of create. We started as just under 100-acre apple orchard, no public facing anything. And, it's always kind of a tale of survival, at least for us. It was like that. And then it was like, we have to add this, we have to do this so we can extend the season a month. We really were playing this game from a 3-month season to becoming a year-round, and we added Christmas trees, and we were just trying to figure a way to make it work. But it's one of those things that's uniquely created out of survival, and the ones that are around today are pretty unique because they found out how to survive, and they've kind of been created over generations. And it's great that you're kind of starting that tradition for your family. And I think that's cool because we need. Traditions can be started at any time. They don't have to be 100 years, but it's going to take tradition to keep it, and to evolve it, and all of that.
Yeah, so. It's interesting you say that because it's usually the next place that I go when recounting how we started, which is not only 15 years ago, but it seems like lifetimes.
Yeah.
We thought we were gonna make it all in 12 weeks.
Yeah.
I thought, we can't even keep. You shouldn't be able to keep people away.
Right.
All this stuff is what people want, and. When you're starting new, oh boy, I couldn't have been more wrong. So same kind of thing. It's like, well, how are we going to get people in here? Well, let's go find some, Michigan cheesemakers. Maybe we can start selling some cheese in the store. We'll start doing jams and jellies. Yeah. And before you know it, I'm standing outside selling Christmas trees in the winter also.
Yeah.
And ice cream,
Yeah.
We did soft serve, hard pack. I know what it's like to stand there with a line of 20 people and you work your ass off putting sprinkles on cones, and then after the chaos is done, you're like, oh great, I just made $25.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. We got to be a lot busier than this. So
I always I think about it, and I feel that we probably made every mistake, but you just kind of just have to keep at it, and you just have to keep kind of trying a new thing. If it doesn't work, cut it. Adapt, pivot. And it's just kind of that endless pursuit, a little bit of trying to get the business model right. Because I hate to say it, but it's not the most, from a textbook, you wouldn't pick the business model necessarily from how it lays out on a calendar and what it does, but it's so unique, the ones that can make it. So I love it.
My buddy, who's also my banker, when I first started out, he's like, okay, hold on a second. You're going to start a seasonal food business and you're going to make all your money in 12 weeks.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah.
Doesn't it sound awesome?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of how, part of that, creativity and needing to make it work is what led us into fermenting cider. And
How'd you learn?
Well, I learned through people like Mike Beck and Lee Lutz. Mike Beck from Uncle John's. Back then, there really wasn't any cider on the shelves. Mike was selling them in growlers with a wax dipped cap, at a store, which is kind of unheard of.
Right.
I've never seen it again now that I think about it. And then Black Star Farms up north, they were bottling cider in champagne bottles at about that time as well. And there may have been a couple others, but it really wasn't the topic of conversation in kind of young circles of alcoholic beverage.
Right.
It was all about craft beer. It was all about craft beer.
Yeah.
And really
for about 15 years there, is it?
Yep. And that's who we chose to sell to. So a friend of mine and a former colleague when I was younger and in college was an avid home brewer, Joel Brower. I said to him, hey, I'm going to be pressing apple juice. Why don't we see if we can't ferment it? If for no other reason, we'll drink it. And we did. We drank every bucket of crappy cider we made for quite a long time.
Yeah, I'll never forget. I brought my first samples. I truth be told, when we did our first cider con, we've been in the apple business, cider business. My dad's third generation, or, second generation apple grower. I'm third, and I'm getting back into the family business. And I go on the cider con tour. I go to your place. I'm like, Dad, we're like, this is all we do is apples, and we're behind. And I was like jealous for a period of time because you guys were, because of what you guys, were doing on the fermentation front. And I never forget. I started after touring. I think it was you guys and Virtue, and I was like, I'm gonna figure this shit out. I have to figure out, how to make cider. It's just a natural evolution for us, and we're still struggling to keep full-time people. We have no year-round business stream, nothing that lasts for more than 2 weeks.
Yep.
No products that can actually last. So this was it just hit me. It's like, this solves it. And then I remember I went home and I tried it. We have a big family Christmas party. My dad's family of 13. Put it in bottles, super proud of it. Everyone drinks it. They're like, dude, this shit sucks. It's fucking awful.
It's terrible.
Yeah, they're like, come back when it, is drinkable like a Bud Light. I'm like, well, it'll never be that.
Well, and that's kind of the Pandora's box of cider is, when you especially being what we call in the industry, predominantly a modern cider maker where
Yes.
you're using, fruit that is grown for fresh eating and
Right.
grocery stores, and that's the box that you open up, and it's the box we opened up where it's like, hey, I'd call Lee all the time, and I'd say, hey man, we just made this product, and I don't like this about it, I don't like that about it. How do we get this rotten egg smell out of here?
Yeah,
Right.
I
mean,
yep.
and it gets you down that path of, not just what kind of flaws you may be having with your fermentation and your processes, but also what the fruit can bring.
Yep.
And it becomes a wormhole of stuff. And that's, I think, what's certainly fun about things like CiderCon and getting together with other like-minded people. We're so far apart when we're out in market and when we're in the trade,
Right.
Because there's so few of us. Getting together on those occasions is it's nice just to have that common interest and commonality with people.
Yeah, I want to get back to that a little bit. I remember when we were much smaller and there wasn't really any orders to fulfill, and you're just you're putzing and tinkering, and Mike was great to me and super graceful in teaching me kind of how his operation was, and we kind of copy pasted honestly from kind of what he was doing. And but I remember, playing with varietals and how excited I would get. You do like a batch of russets and it like tastes like pineapple-y. And I'm like, this is fucking insane. This is so cool. And then, you get to, start talking about scale and, trying to be like produce year round. You're like, well, a varietal year round, super hard. How do you, so there's so much uniqueness with cider industry still to explore. And I still have, pipe dreams of bringing to, mass of, a, elevated artisanal product, but I feel like cider at mass, you have to do some level of the dessert fruit and kind of.
We got to get people there.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you don't start right off grabbing an Imperial IPA and enjoying it either.
That's a good point.
I mean, or anything for that matter. I mean, it takes time to appreciate, and I think we need a shift, and I don't necessarily know what that is, because we have to operate in the trade channels that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't give us a lot of time to to talk to the consumer. What keeps me very optimistic about cider as a category, even though it's has remained relatively small compared to the others, is that it's coming from these places of individuals and their families, and many times in existing orchard like yourselves, where in a way I feel like it's kind of ironic. I felt like us doing it early, we kind of woke a little bit of the beast, where it's now I'm seeing up on Fruit Ridge over on our side of the state, you're seeing different orchards say, hey, now we're going to add a little retail, and we're going to start fermenting cider.
Right.
And, when I go up there, I say, we need 10 more of these.
Yeah.
You need to have like a wine trail across the ridge, and they need to be in these unique places that bring people close to the fruit, because we're in a more urban setting at our place, and it's hard to make that connection sometimes for people. They're out to have a good time and have a drink and and have something to eat. You don't often have the opportunity to slow them down and say, well, wait a minute, let's talk about what you're drinking.
Yeah.
And why it is the way it is and why it's unique from other categories.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a more interesting fruit in the world than apples. And I mean, yeah, I think grapes is, I'm my first, drink of choice is usually wine. I love it. I'm into the history of it. I like, you can really geek out and go down some rabbit holes on the wine side. But, from a pure fruit standpoint, I feel like apples are so unique, and I just feel like it still hasn't had its time. It hasn't had its time in the limelight quite yet. And I feel like, we've made inroads. Different brands have made inroads. Different companies have made inroads. The industry has made inroads. But I still don't feel like we've fully, got it to where it should be. I mean, from mythology, from history, to just the complexity of it, the uniqueness of it. I think there's so much more, to elevate, within, the context of the apple and the industry and just the heritage. I mean, just the fact that, cider mills is a thing.
Yeah.
It's just
it's like a Midwest thing.
It's a Midwest, 100% Midwest thing. Nowhere else in the country really will you go and have that. And I'm pretty proud of that, and I want to continue that. And I do think, hard cider is a good avenue for, sustaining some of these, generational cider mills that need to evolve, for all the same reasons we all need to. It's hard to make a living on 12 weeks.
It is, and providing that experience and that knowledge, I think, ends up giving people a better feeling about parting with more of their money for something that's higher quality.
Right.
And even just when you say apples, one of the most complex fruits or the most complex fruit in the world, I imagine most people that don't necessarily aren't necessarily from the apple business wonder, like, what on earth is so unique about an apple?
Right.
How could an apple be unique? And it's because they lack the understanding of the history of the fruit and the diversity of the fruit in its shape and size and makeup. I got a good example of that. I've been fortunate through working with the American Cider Association extensively over the years, and there's kind of a global club of artisan cider makers that's
I'm not in there yet. I'm working
equally
on it.
Small and very cool. And a good friend of mine who lives in the Basque Country is describing an apple that as a kid, his grandmother, they'd pick the fruit and they set it out on the counter, and it would basically dry age for months. I mean, months. It would dehydrate over time. Between the tannin and the sugar content of the fruit, it didn't provide a good environment for bacteria or mold or anything else. So it basically sit there and prune up. And once it became soft enough and old enough, you ate it. It was like a piece of candy. It's like dried fruit.
Seriously?
Seriously.
It's a natural.
And a tiny little ugly apple that you wouldn't think to put in your mouth.
Yeah.
And you take a bite of it, and it's like dried. I mean, it's like candy. I wouldn't try putting a Golden Delicious on your counter for 4 months.
Yeah, right.
You certainly probably aren't going to want to eat it.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's a very complex fruit, and we just have to keep trying to tell people about it.
What when you talk about the international landscape for cider, who do you think? I mean, obviously the UK's got a kind of a deep, tranche of attention, from the drinking class. I know areas of Spain, Australia, there's different pockets where cider's, popping up and making it. But where do you think it's?
Yeah, I mean, Russia, Germany.
Yeah, I mean, you could go on, right?
You really can go on, and people talk about England a lot because it's a lot of consumption over there. Mm-hmm. What you have to understand about that is that by and large, the majority of consumption of cider is not the kind of what we would consider artisan cider that people are drinking, even in Europe.
Right.
So it's,
right.
I don't know that
concentrate.
It's concentrate base. It's meant to be, it's just meant to taste good and be something that people drink.
Right.
It's not meant to necessarily care about or write
Sure.
home about.
Right.
And so I think people have to keep that in mind, that the majority of people, I think, out there that are drinkers, they just want to have a drink that they like to drink. Mm-hmm. They don't want to have to explain why. Mm-hmm. They just like to drink it.
This was always my problem with a lot of the stuff at CiderCon. I always felt like I've been a little bit of the outsider, because I always thought that, I always kind of believed that people wanted a good brand that tasted well And sometimes, as much as, I want to elevate the fruit and I want to do that people do, just as you say, just want a good tasting drink that makes them, that tastes good. They like the branding and, is unique in its own right. Not necessarily for all the reasons, all the sommeliers or the. Yeah. What's the word for the cider sommelier? Pommelier.
Yeah, you bet.
I'm not one of those.
No, I don't know if I dare want to take the test. I was a part of its development, but I don't think I want to sit for it.
But I always kind of felt there was a little bit of a divide there, because I do think that is, there's some of that maybe we gotta you gotta walk and chew gum at the same time. You gotta do that while still appreciating the artisan side of it.
There are unavoidable truths about being in the beverage industry, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
And there is a lay of the land. This is a mature industry. It's been going on for a long time, and there are some really big players in it. Mm-hmm. Joe Herron, who is the founder of Crispin, said once to me, he said, Paul, we're nothing but kitty cats in a room full of lions. and so you have to be fierce.
Yeah, right.
It is true. The beverage industry is full of really big players, and they set a landscape that you can't ignore.
Right.
So places that, I think it was in Oakland CiderCon, so 2 years ago, because we had one virtual, I remember being somewhat frustrated, similar to what you're talking about, where it's like, God, here we're talking about all this stuff and everybody cares about it. It's all great, but so many people need to start considering the ABCs of the beverage industry.
Yeah, of the industry, the game that you're playing. It's not necessarily the play you're making, but it's the game you're playing and what that whole board looks like.
And it's also not fun. It's just not. It's not the fun part of the business. The fun part.
No, it's the businessy side of the business. It's the macroeconomic side of the business. It's all the trend side of the business. It's consumer insights. It's all the shit that's not about, the product.
Yeah. So what's kind of cool, I think, for cider, and the reason why we have this, somewhat of an international coalition of craft producers is that
cool.
There's a lot of other markets, Europe in particular, that cider isn't as popular as, say, beer or wine, because of very similar reasons that it's not popular for the United States as much as it is beer or wine.
Yeah.
And we credit prohibition and then the transportability of grain and the ease of making beer versus having to wait for fruit as being kind of cider's demise from being the number one product of choice. I had a great opportunity to visit Abel, Belgium, and met Jean-Pierre Stassen, who's a third generation cider maker, and his cider is now owned by Heineken. But touring their place, he was describing to me that a big part of what set cider back in Europe was World War II. The beaches of Normandy were destroyed. They were full of apple trees.
Is that right?
Yeah. So he's like, you've got so much of this landscape that got destroyed, and then once the war is over, it's like, well, what are we going to drink? Are we going to wait 3 to 4 years before we have apples again?
Yeah. What's next?
What can we get up and running quickly? So there's more factors than that, but ironically, it has less to do with people's tastes change. They don't like cider anymore. It's none of that.
Right.
It's far more kind of these outside influences that ended up playing a big role.
We've kind of been talking around it, but one of the things I was curious, what is your diagnosis of the cider industry today? Is it healthy? Is it struggling? And what are its biggest challenges?
I think in many ways the challenges are the same as they were before. We've always had the challenge of having a product that needs to be hand sold and explained to the consumer. Most people do not have a good perception of what cider is. We have people come in to our place and, what kind of things do you drink? Well, just give me something dry. Well, we don't have a cider on our tap list that has more sugar than an IPA does.
Right.
And most of them have absolutely zero sugar in it.
Yeah.
Now we have to put it on the darn can.
That's really good, by the way.
Yeah. Put 0 on the can. We're not adding sugar. There's there's no sugar in the product, and that's just an education thing.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned access, and that's kind of where the business side of it goes. you've got a very well-established distributor network. You've got, a lot of difficulty in gaining access to the consumer when you have so many brands across so many different categories with a relatively limited distributor base to get to all. And it's a big country, so it's not an easy job, to get product all over. But I think we had our heyday once, kind of that 2012 to 2011 to 2015 where
it was just
everybody's calling you because they want to write an article about cider.
Right.
And, this latest shift towards seltzers to me just kind of re-energizes that we have to go back to the basics of hand selling.
Yeah, right.
Because, people went from seemingly cautious and caring about the ingredients that go into their food, the ingredients that go into their products, where it comes from, what's the story. I think this is all romantic and great, so I'm drinking it because of that.
Right.
And now they're just walking out with a box of white cans.
Right.
And
I do think there's a silver lining in that a bit, because I do think there's an opportunity for cider for all the reasons people pick up those white cans. I think there's elements of cider that can correlate, and I do think there's an inroad there, and what I'm kind of just generally calling the beyond beer category. So how I think about it anymore is, you have beer, like take wine out of the picture. Not that I don't want to, I think there's a time and place to sell against wine with cider, but really it's always been, in my mind, beer. It's where you're competing on the shelf. You kind of have the beer category and then everything that's not beer that's on that shelf, and I just call it beyond beer, and I feel like we're just that's the space, and that space can grow and keep encroaching on beer because there's still so many feet in the cooler for beer. And I'm a beer drinking Bud Light farmer, so I'm not anti-beer or anything, but I think as I've tried to communicate with distributors and with customers, it's like, hey, cider's part of this beyond beer category. That beyond beer category
got bigger,
got way bigger, and it's what people want.
Yep.
And cider can play a part in that. And so there's this whole framework that I'm kind of with our team, and I'm trying to calibrate, our thinking about how we communicate. We do. We want to be the stewards of the cider category, and from a distribution and education standpoint from there. But also trying to help cider fit into this context of beyond beer, because I do think there's strength in that, and if we can find our way to fit in that and communicate in that, I think that there's opportunity for brands. And I think that's how we've kind of set it up, and it seems to, it has merit. When you look at a category, I go, I don't know, you probably do the same thing, like study liquor stores and beer stores and grocery stores and just kind of see how the sets are laid out, and it really is kind of that divide. It's no longer like, here's beer, here's cider, here's seltzer, here's this. It's like, it's beer, and then everything else is kind of just in this section. And how can we, play our part and add value to the reasons people go there? I think they go there for a couple reasons. It tastes either sweet and better than beer, and sugary and and get you buzzed. That's one. That's the RTD. That's the Mike's Hard Lemonade. That's part of that. You have it won't get me fat. It's 100 calories. It's gluten free. It doesn't make me feel bloated. All these kind of things that kind of make that, it tastes good. It tastes kind of like a wine, but it's lighter. I think there's all these types of, it's more spritzy. I think there's all these things that kind of can be, packed in there. And it's like, how do you create products that kind of fit in that kind of landscape a little bit?
Yeah,
So,
I think you're exactly right. And, I've been saying too, another silver lining of seltzer is that there are so many of them that lack sweetness.
Yeah.
And, for so long, the beverage industry has been playing to sweetness in the sweet American palate for a long, long time. And now that there are so many people, I put kind of the non-alcoholic flavored waters in the same category.
Yeah.
It's like when I started drinking, LaCroix, I was like, why am I drinking this in a way? It's kind of absent flavor. And a lot of it, for whether it's LaCroix or whether it's an alcoholic version of something like that, there is an element where people are looking for something that doesn't have so many calories and doesn't have so much sugar.
Yeah.
So if those brands are leading people towards drinking a drier product, that is great for cider. Also, you see a lot of advertising and focus on, ironically, the healthy for you alcohol. Which, that's a whole nother conversation on how silly that can be. But Nonetheless, people are looking for, they're being choosy about their calories, and where cider fits so well to that is that it is God's honest true of a product as a wine is.
Yes.
Right. I mean,
Yes.
or more. It is, I mentioned the, putting 0 on the can. We've coming out with these products that have 0 sugar, and then maybe we're adding raspberries to them, but it's literally a 2-ingredient product. And when you can do that with cider, you can take very simple ingredients, put them together into a beautiful product that, like I said, is just so honest. And if we can kind of cut the potential for negatives of alcohol, is about as healthy as you're going to get when you're seeking an alcoholic beverage too.
Sure.
So
right.
I think you're right. I think it certainly plays into, and we have an opportunity to break into, some of that other, outside of beer or other than beer category. But it also brings up the challenges of access, and
right.
who gets to take up that space, and how do you do it?
Right. What states, in your opinion, are cider states, are apple states that are leading the charge? If you had to pick 5, who do you think has the best cider culture, if you will? You've been around more. You've been to more. I
think
this more than I have.
I'm obviously biased, but I think Michigan's got as good of a cider culture as anybody on the planet. I mean, you can say, well, maybe we don't have the breadth of different types of cider varieties and all this other stuff as maybe older world places do, but there's something about the convergence of Midwest hospitality and agriculture and that put us in a pretty high position there. And then, outside of that, it's not surprising that cider comes from apple states. People think about, well, maybe they don't think about it, but Washington, Pacific Northwest, Midwest, and the Northeast is where, by and large, the majority of apples are grown.
Right.
So it makes sense that there are the most vibrant cider communities.
You think we're growing enough apples? You think we have the right? No,
not even close.
I know.
And for me,
I'm a little worried about it.
Yeah, and fortunately, we know some growers that are pretty aggressive in putting in more fruit. Price of apples is high. I mean, one of the hardest parts of this business, to your point of not just the seasonality of it, but the cost of it. I mean, we've got to squeeze every drop out of a piece of fruit, for Pete's sake. You don't get to turn on the faucet,
right?
And create a menu like what you do with making beer,
right?
That seasonality, first and foremost, is a huge problem. I remember getting to my first time that we're really doing pretty good business, and I'm like, holy shit, the apples are going to run out in April, or March. How in the hell am I going to take all summer and then, a chunk of the beginning of the fall when I can't get any of my raw ingredient? I mean, it presents all sorts of problems of storage and availability and price being the biggest of them.
Yeah. That's the other thing. You got to compete with products that are, you can turn the faucet on for. And you got to compete. It really is. If you can make it in cider, you can probably make it in anything, because you have all those macro challenges.
It's hard to compete with beer when you're making a product that comes from something so expensive. And part of that is because of the fact that growers are incented to grow for the fresh market because they get their best return out of the fresh market. The cider we get, or the apples we get to use, are generally kind of a byproduct of that culling for the fresh market. Yeah. So it's hard to argue with the economics there. The other side of it is, I think we've got some regulatory opportunity in allowing people to farm in a different way if they so choose. Meaning, these producers that are very aggressive, they're trying to grow the most perfect apple they possibly can because they want to sell it to Meijer or Whole Foods or whoever's the highest payer. That is a very competitive, very capital intensive, difficult game to be in if you're an apple grower. I'd like to see our growth go towards processed fruit. The Michigan process industry got killed off by Chinese imports of concentrate. Now they're talking about, and there has been about bringing fresh fruit from overseas. that took away a bit of an infrastructure
Right.
and a growing mentality that is hard to get back.
Right.
I mean, you go to places in Europe where they're growing apples for cider, not
Right.
for fresh consumption.
Right.
And if you can,
Well, because you'd grow completely different for juice, right? I mean, if you knew it was going for juice, you'd grow different. You'd trellis them higher. You know, you wouldn't care about the perfect apple.
You'd pick them up off the ground with a machine.
Yep.
Exactly. Multiple times a season,
Right.
if need be. It
Yep.
doesn't take. People don't. Let me back up. One of the questions on the American Cider Association has a certified cider professional exam, and it's akin to Cicerone and level 1 sommelier and or server level. And one of the questions is, are the majority of apples in the United States picked by hand or by machine? And you would be dumbfounded at how many people that are seeking to take this exam
think it's a machine.
think it's a machine.
Yeah.
Because why wouldn't it be? It should be industrialized and mechanized and modernized and everything else. It is not.
Right.
I mean, it's got to be picked by someone's hand.
I always thought, I don't know if it was Angry Orchard or something, and they did like this whole like hand-picked like campaign, and I'm like, it's smart because it's gonna work, but it's like every fucking apple's handpicked.
Yeah,
that's not.
I look at it with lament.
Yeah,
I'm like,
right.
oh my God, no wonder they're so expensive.
Yeah.
Someone's got to touch them at least once.
Which one of these should I pop open? Casanova Wild.
Yeah, since we're talking about varietals,
Yeah.
this is we have Casanova and Casanova Wild. Casanova is a small community just north of Grand Rapids, and it's the location for one of the orchards that we work with. And this particular orchard has cider fruit that we put some painstaking effort into getting into fruition. But
Casanova is actually a place in Michigan.
Yep. So this is grown by the Dietrichs. We put in. They very graciously.
If you want.
Yeah, I will. I stopped drinking yesterday, so.
There you go. As my uncle always says, I picked a bad week to stop drinking. As he cracks his first beer of the day.
You know what that's from?
No.
Have you ever watched the movie Airplane?
I haven't. No. Is that,
well,
is
you
that
better go watch. It is.
All right. He ripped off.
He ripped it off.
All right, I
Yeah.
didn't know
You
that.
can say that about smoking or sniffing glue or anything. You'll have to check it out.
Well, cheers, man.
Yeah. Cheers. So yeah, this is. I mean,
smells delicious.
Yeah, you can tell right away by looking at the color of. So I was saying this is Yarlington Mill, Dabinet. It's got some Baldwin, and what else does I have in it? I keep forgetting all of them, but it's a different. It's a different color. It's a much deeper color.
It's like a rich gold. It's not like a light.
Yep.
Pale.
It's lightly carbonated. It's 8.5% alcohol. That is higher
Unique.
than what people would think is normal for a cider, but that's just because.
And that's just all natural.
That's just because those particular varieties, or a few of them anyway, have high sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Golden Russet, has really good sugar to it. So we did this in a couple different ways. We wanted to blend and ferment nice and clean and stainless, and then we also wanted to say, why don't we let the fruit guide the other product. So we call it wild because we didn't inoculate or add yeast. It just kind of took off with whatever was in it. So
it's great. And how long will it keep in a bottle, do you think?
Well, that's a good question.
I always wondered this about cider. Is there's different schools of thought on how well it cellars. And I don't know what the real conclusion is.
It changes for sure. And like I was saying earlier, when we were looking at these little cans, one of which is our Brut, and the other, and I also have our Brut in our newer packaging. I think cider, even modern ciders, will taste a hell of a lot better after 6 months than they do the day after they were canned.
Mm-hmm.
It is, to me, you can't argue it.
It smooths everything out. All the harshness that might be in there from like an early season or mid-season like fermentation, it just it gives it that mellowing effect that I think really
it allows apple to come back.
Yep. Any good apple wine's a perfect example of that. If you actually make I've only made apple wine once, technically, but at first it was like just kind of this hot and boozy, kind of apple product, and then you let it sit for 6, 7, 8 months, and you actually can like follow just how much it smooths out, and you get to a point where the apple comes back, it feels fresh, it feels smooth, balanced, and time is a great
it is
a great friend.
This I can't remember if it was this Chapman's blend that I brought. This was from 2012. So I mean, you'll have to let me know what you think of it. The last time I opened it, it was still good. I say to people that are buying our cans, please open them and drink them, and then go buy another one. Yeah, right. I mean, please just let's keep the lights on and keep drinking it. It's all good. But certainly time is a benefit to cider for sure, and I've opened some pretty old stuff that tastes great. I've opened some old stuff that tastes like shit.
Who do you think is like the preeminent, predominant like cider maker in the world? Is there someone who you think is really the, I don't know, I'm trying to make a comparison, but I guess is there someone who you think really has solidified themselves as far as the products they make and the renown that they've acquired?
Well, there's certainly kind of your famous cider people. Tom Oliver from the UK is a famous cider person and also a really great guy to hang out with. Ego at Zepain is a friend of mine. He's arguably one of the best cider makers I know. But everybody's doing it in their own place.
Sure.
Those two particular examples, they've got their own cider culture, vastly different than each other and vastly different than what we're doing. I try to stay away from top 10 lists. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Where you see it online all the time, where it's who's got the best burger, who's got the best this.
Yeah, right.
I think, holy crap, we're all in here slugging it out, trying to make it work. The last thing we need to do is disparage and or try to put ourselves at the top.
Sure.
So I try not to participate in it, but I found to me that the most knowledge I've gained from cider tends to come from people that know wine also.
Right.
I mean, it's an older craft. Yeah. At least in
that's what I was kind of it's kind of what I was agitating towards, because I was you see wine where there's kind of figureheads and people who communicate and educate and kind of the understanding of the nuance and art of wine, and I was Tom Oliver was one that came to mind. I was wondering stateside if there's just trying to think a little bit when we talk about that education piece, if that type of culture that is in wine from the winemaker, cider maker perspective is what's needed for some of that education, or if it's just there are brands hand to hand talking about product.
There are some. I've met some very talented people. The guys over at Citizen and on the East Coast, awesome. They're awesome. They're smart guys. The list is pretty long. Dave Takish comes to mind from Two Towns. I've got to know him a bit with some other boards, and he's a very knowledgeable and impressive cider maker, and
like the nicest guy in cider too.
Also super nice, and formerly longest hair, but
he cut it.
He did, yeah. He did. So, but I think what I respect the most is people that really understand what they're doing through the use of science and technology. I have a harder time. I've been on an anti-funk campaign for a number of years. The word itself, funk, I just don't like it because it's very broad.
Look how flawed my stuff is.
And a lot of it.
Basically all it means.
And a lot of it comes from it's just messed up, and it shouldn't taste like rotten eggs, you know. It's not funk, it's garbage. And so
hipsters did that, by the way.
They did do that. They did it with beer too.
Yeah.
But and I don't want to necessarily disparage anyone for what they think is good, because who am I to say what someone else thinks tastes good? But at the same time,
you kind of can with that. That's tasting.
I mean, there should be a baseline.
There's
right?
A baseline,
right?
Yeah.
So
we can agree on some things, that some things taste better than others, and some things
I would
just
hope
taste
so.
weird. Yeah.
I would hope so.
Who knows anymore, though?
Yeah. So I appreciate people that really understand their craft and why they're making it, bringing out certain elements of the fruit,
right.
or trying to highlight a particular fruit, or understanding the fermentation process and how to keep it clean and how to keep it shelf stable. And frankly, that's part of why I've spent as much time as I have with, cider associations in the community of cider. Is, there's a lot of basic knowledge out there that really ought to be in people's hands so they can make a product that meets that threshold of generally this tastes good.
Yeah.
And if we can get more and more ciders in the market there where it's mutually agreed that generally this tastes good and hopefully it tastes great, we're all better off for it.
I feel like you've done such a good job of that. You've given a lot of your time to the general cider community, much more than I have. I've been, kind of here working on our thing.
I know. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I'm there. You're not.
Yes.
Where are you?
Dude, I have.
I don't blame you, by the way. Sometimes I look at it. I'm like, wait a minute. Aren't I supposed to be running my own business?
Yeah.
But
I just, we have such like a three-headed monster here with the entertainment stuff, the alcohol business, the farming thing. Yeah. I got my dad and his twin brother who are awesome, but they're, we're, moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So it's always been hard to, and we're at I think maybe it's an excuse, but we're on the east side of the state. We're a little secluded a little bit from, I guess, the general, you're closer to Chicago, kind of where a lot of the things are happening, at least from, within Michigan. West side of the state's always kind of been the Fruit Ridge. It's kind of where conventions are, all that sort of stuff. You've been a little bit more at the epicenter of it a little bit, but now that things are, I want to say kind of stabilized. Maybe that's a good way. As you're growing and you're doing all that sort of stuff, nothing's stable, so you're always having to be on, and your phone's ringing 24/7. All of that. I feel like there's more time to give to that.
Yeah. And part of it for me, I think, is just I enjoy it, and maybe I shouldn't be spending time there, and or shouldn't have been over the years, but I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's kind of the fun stuff, and maybe that's just comfort in numbers, but
yeah.
It is the
fun stuff. But it's the relationship side. It's, I've met a ton of great people, through the industry, and there's more to meet, a lot more to meet, so, I'm looking at, where's CiderCon this year?
Richmond, Virginia.
Is that right?
In person. Yep.
I love that. I love we picked that's a good East Coast spot.
It's been kind of a goal of the American Cider Association to, spread out CiderCon and try to reach people, as a membership tool, as a, just a convenience tool. I mean, a lot of us in the industry, they don't have all the resources in the world to fly all over the country and spend time at conferences. Not when you got goats on the loose, like we just saw. But so, we want to try to move it around to give people access, and try to make it convenient, try to make it affordable. It's always been the cheapest conference you've ever heard of, which is all relative, but it is relative to conferences.
Yeah, right.
So it's going to be nice to have it in Virginia. It's also a good tool for the industry to reach people. Mm-hmm. We went to Baltimore a couple of years back, and California 2 years ago, and it's fun to move into a new town with a whole bunch of cider nerds, 1,000 of them, and people don't even really know what's coming. They're like, why do all these people like cider so much? But we tend to bring that to communities just through the act of hospitality and being a part of wherever we're convening, and I think that has marketability to it. I think that helps us all.
Yeah, I had some great memories from those concerts those conferences. I'm looking forward to Richmond will be a good spot. It's kind of Boulder Rock's backyard, yeah, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. And a great wine, scene. I think my cousin got married out there. 2 years ago. So
I've not spent a ton of time there, so I'm looking forward to it too.
Yeah, it'll be cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Have you talked to Mike recently?
Beck?
Yeah.
I yesterday.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We Glint Cap, which is the Great Lakes International Cider and Perry competition, the world's largest competition that we've been blessed to have in this state, and championed by Beck and some others over the past more than a decade. But yeah, it's the world's largest competition. We have entries coming in from all over the place. They all come to my place, which is
that's fun.
Yeah, it's great. So we're heavy-handed in being a part of that organization and a part of that competition. So that's coming up here at the end of the month. Normally we do that in the spring, but we missed it.
Back.
Yeah, we missed it last year, and we thought, well, we're gonna try to get a mid-year one in just so we don't miss 2 years.
Right. How are submissions this year? Are they strong?
Pretty good. Again, we've got some legislative challenges with this competition because, as you know, there's a lot of regulation in alcohol, and a lot of it doesn't make any sense, and it certainly has no particular interest in something like an industry competition.
Right.
But it does, if you're trying to bring in 200 ciders from Canada when the border's basically closed.
Right.
And not only that, but you send a pallet or two of alcohol around, and it gets noticed. People want to know where it's coming from. Who's it going to go to? Was it going to be sold? Is it not going to be sold?
Just tell them it's juice, man.
I know. Right. So there are a lot of inherent issues that I think we can fix over time, but
it's just that shit moves slow. It just moves so slow. I mean, even how cider is taxed, there has to be a broader scope, for cider than is currently constructed in our laws and legal, and that stuff just moves so slow, and it's people like us, I guess, that hopefully change it over long, painstaking tracks of time.
It does. We got to keep after those little wins here and there, which sometimes those can happen pretty quickly, but yeah, it's definitely not a fast moving process.
Yeah. You ever get into apple brandy? Doing any like this distillation of?
Yeah, we've had we don't have a still, but we've had a lot of our cider distilled over the years, and
this is very good.
Thank you. Yeah. The problem with apple brandy, again, I think for the U.S. is apples are really expensive. I mean, I've had countless small distillers approach me with, "Hey, we'd like to consider doing a brandy. Can we buy some fermented base?" And I say to them, "Well, yeah, you can buy fermented base, but here's the price." And they about fall over. I mean, when you're distilling from grain versus when you're distilling from fruit.
Right.
They're like, well, how many brandy bottles of brandy am I gonna sell at $80?
Well, what I'm worried about is, we haven't had, or at least this isn't fucking wood, but whatever. We haven't had a real, crop damage since we've started. 2012 we lost like all of our crop, and that's one of the reasons we got into it, because we're like, shit, if we had fermented juice, it would still,
have value.
Still have value. And we haven't, knock on wood, we haven't, had a big freeze out, but we had a little one this year. We had a decent one. I think we always say if we can get 60% of a crop, we can still really, that's still a pretty good crop, because we'd have to go through hand thinning or whatever. But we got clipped this year, and I imagine if that's true across the state, which I believe it is, prices are going to be up for the next year, and we'll have to eat a lot of that, go into our margins, and
and demand is up too, and it is a challenge. I mean, when your biggest raw material on a product can fluctuate in price to the extent that it does for us, and on the other side of our business, our prices are very inelastic. You can't say to your wholesaler, "Hey, apple prices were up 15%. I'm going to raise my prices 15%."
Right.
I mean, I remember when you did that once a number of years ago and talked about how painful that is.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different.
We did it again this year. We're doing it right now. Just have to. There's no way. I mean, we have a responsibility to pay for, to continue to pay our people well, and make sure they're continuing to provide for their families, and we're not going to do that making less money.
Profitability is the ultimate sustainability, right? I mean, you can't do it without a proper profit.
Yeah, and so, but given the nature, the macroeconomic kind of nature of inflation, I think people are more understanding now than previous years, where they know it's
we're all a party to inflation, aren't
we? Yeah, right. Yeah, kind of.
It's you take your opportunity when you can, and that's kind of what drives the whole thing up. But
yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's it's just something that we've been afraid to do for such a long time. And I think the longer I'm in this business, the more you got to have some confidence to just be honest about
what it costs and what it is. And it's not like you're robbing anyone. You're doing what's reasonable.
Yeah. Well, and for me this year, the most interesting thing was, even after a price increase from us that has to go through our wholesaler network, I go to these stores and the price of our product is still the same.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I should have done this years ago.
Yeah.
Like, they were totally happy just, kind of letting that get absorbed, throughout the channels.
Right.
And here I am so worried about it. But,
right.
I mean, there's obviously that balance, but it's, it's one of those things you once you do it, I guess maybe it gets more comfortable.
Did you say you had a story with one of your ciders from, you said?
Oh, from Dave's podcast.
Dave.
I know Dave. Yep. Dave Engbers.
Couple of Grand Rapids guys that.
Well, he went to Hope also. He's a bit.
Oh, that's right. You're a Hope guy.
Yep. He's a bit older than I am. I don't know, maybe a handful of years or so.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember going down to Founders, in their old place, and I wasn't in the business at the time, but once I started getting into it, I'd reach out to him and Mike from time to time for some advice or what am I doing here or there. And I found this just on my shelf, products that we don't do anymore or had only done once. We did one, it's a sizer, so we put in.
Is that Puff the Magic Sizer?
That's one we did with New Holland.
Okay, because I remember that name.
Yeah, and the Peter, Paul, and Mary people contacted me about that. I heard
I got one from Francis Ford Coppola. I was waiting for the horse head.
I thought it was pretty cool to see it. I was like, oh, well, you can change the name, I guess, to Puff Off or Go Puff Yourself. But
that's fine.
We were nice enough and just shortened it. But
so
this was Founders did a product a while back called Doom. It was part of their Backwoods series. And I don't even remember what kind of beer it was now that I think about it, but this goes back a long way. So we did a Cider Van Doom, putting a little Dutch into the middle of it with the van. And so I thought of Dave with this because this was the second unofficial collaboration that we did with Founders, because they never really acknowledged any of it. But the first one I called Founders Keepers. And I thought, hey, that's clever. Yeah. I love it. And then I got a call from Dave, a while later. He's like, hey, someone in our marketing department just said that, you have a product like Founders Keepers or something. He's like, yeah, you might want to, not push that one too much. So anyway, it was kind of a one and done thing, but we've got some old relics here. We did a product called Michigan Wit, which was... That's our first
coriander,
coriander and orange peel. Kind of, Oberon season was the only beer season there was back then, and I thought, well, those are good flavor profiles for cider.
Right.
And so this bottle, this is probably 2009. It's 2010 maybe. So hasn't blown up yet. So I don't dare open it.
It's still good.
Well, yeah, it's got some shit floating around in it, but I don't dare open it. So a few relics. From the shelf.
What's you got any upcoming moves happening at Vander Mill, as far as new products, new offerings at the cidery, anything like that?
Well, the biggest change for us, aside from kind of the COVID related type of things that we have to do, would be that we sold our original location this past year. Which actually was a pre-COVID, one of those neighbor comes and says, would you ever want to sell your building? I need to expand. And, you can always have a conversation. And that conversation ended up leading us to sell the property, which hindsight with COVID and being able to not have to so-called worry about another retail space during that time ended up being a blessing.
Yeah, for sure.
It freed up some capital for us to clean some things up that we needed to clean up within our own operation and strengthen the balance sheet a little bit. And what it's also pushing us to do is our Spring Lake location had far more of that Michigan cider mill vibe to it. When we opened Grand Rapids, we were all hot on tap room and, lots of taps of cider and cool food and cool space. And I think we lost a lot of the cider mill feel.
Right.
So we're taking some of those elements from Spring Lake to our facility, literally. We're
cider pressing.
Yeah, we're pressing there. We have to build out a new space to do donuts and push cider and bring pumpkins in. So the idea is let's try to really put our foot forward on retail in Grand Rapids and build that urban cider mill.
Well, I almost feel like you can do like a urban cider mill, but farm market, like farmers market type vibe, like Eastern Market here, almost like you have the right buildings, you got the right parking lots, you have that back building. I think you can really make that happen, almost like a walking, kind of experience, cider, donuts, the whole nine. That's we realized a little bit, especially in season, on the 12 weeks. I mean, if you can build it, they'll come, Vander Mill cidery is one thing, but, if you really lean into that cider mill fall deal, I mean, you could probably really capitalize on that cider mill part of it,
Well, and like a lot of, I think, cider tap rooms and, there aren't a lot of them. I mean, if you really think about it.
Yeah, there's like
a retail place that you go to that is solely focused on cider are very few and far between. And, I think there's a reason for that. And part of that is just the lack of education of the consumer of what we do. Yeah. So we're going to continue to offer, we offer beer at our location. We've got our distilled spirits permit. So we've done some pre-mixed cocktails or cocktails on draft. And I think we just need to, get out to our community that, even though you might not think you're ready for cider or you don't know much about it, you can feel okay about showing up and having something.
Right. Right.
And most of what I like to say is just try a cider. Don't be a baby. I mean, my goodness, if you're an adult that can drink alcohol and you're old enough to do so, you should be able to take a sip of dang near anything that's produced commercially and not make a face. And
right. Give it a spin.
Give it a spin. Yeah. Give it the old college try.
Well, Paul, thanks for coming out, man. I appreciate you and all you do, and I love talking to you. You're one of the guys who I think that has always been about the industry before even your own success, and I think that you've always really, at least for me, have been a real leader in it when we haven't had a ton of them. So appreciate that, and hopefully we can keep making inroads, and I think we are, and we will.
Yeah.
But there's definitely challenges, but I think that. We got something special here in Michigan, and the fact that you guys can do what you do on the west side of the state, and we can do what we do on the east side of the state with, your cousins and, all the other cider mills out here. And, as much as we can preserve this, I think it's better for all of us. It is a unique cultural experience here in the Midwest, and, I'm proud of it and, want to do what I can do. And I think that the more we can educate and, communicate and, get back to fighting the good fight against the what was the quote? We're kittens and these and
we're in a room full of lions.
Well, the more we can kind of work together to continue to do that, I think it's good for all of us. So
I agree, and like I say to my kids all the time, I've got a teenager now and one teenager almost, and they see how hard my wife Amanda and I work at this business, and nothing good comes easy, and it's not any different for us in the cider industry.
Yeah, right. Keep plugging away. It's kind of the one thing I learned from my dad and uncle. It's like they're farmers, and I think just just being like obsessively consistent in just waking up every day and trying it again and try it again. You eventually kind of get it figured out, and it works. As long we got to be perseverant in this industry because it takes that.
Yeah, it's one failure after the next.
Yeah,
I mean, really.
And you just have to be resilient. I mean, we've made every mistake possible in every way possible, from hires to bad business investments to everything, and you just keep waking up every day and putting the Carhartt boots on and going back at it. You know?
Yeah, well, you guys have done a great job. I remember the CiderCon you referred to earlier when you and your dad came there. I remember
started grilling you, asking a million questions.
Yeah, and then you were like, "Oh, well, we have golden russets." I was like, "You have golden russets? How about I'll buy them all?"
Yeah.
You know, I mean, those are the days where finding something like that was a unicorn.
Yeah, right.
But it's been fun to watch you guys succeed and do so well in this industry and be a part of bringing cider to light for a lot of consumers. And you know, I always talk highly about other cider producers, and it really doesn't matter what their size or what their plan. I've even been criticized for, you know, I'll see an FMB or a fermented malt beverage that's got a big apple on a billboard, and I think, well, shit, I can't afford that billboard.
Yeah,
so
right. Yeah, right.
At least there's an apple on it.
Yeah, right.
I mean, maybe
the Busch Light apple. Everyone's like kind of sending me memes. I'm like,
hey,
honestly, I love Busch Light, and I love apples.
Right?
So
maybe it'll bring them to our doorstep one day,
right.
and I think you have to try to look optimistically, and it's certainly unbecoming to talk down to people or brands or anything, and we try to carry that throughout our business and keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah, good, man. Well, cheers. Thanks.
All right, cheers. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. You can find Everything Borrowed on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Show your support and drop a 5-star review to help more people find our channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Stay up to date with us on Facebook, Instagram, and everythingborrowedpodcast.com. EBP is produced by Chelsea Cox, Jason Brown, and Vox Adams. Edited and filmed by Nick Ferguson. Art is by Adam Yarborough. Everything Borrowed is an After Hours Media production. Copyright 2021.